I am happy to have you with us tonight. Thank you for spending your evening with us. We have a special guest, Dr. Steve Lombardo, here to give us a really great presentation that I think you guys are going to love. And let me just give a little background on what we're talking about and how we got here. So this is part LKGA has been on this exploration of trying to educate ourselves on all things water quality and really just continuing to educate ourselves on all the available science that's out there. And we're very blessed to have an amazing amount of researchers that have done a lot of really great work and continue to do a lot of great work in and around our fishery. And so there's so much out there to learn and to know. And so this is part of a greater series, lecture series that we started to just try to provide our members a way to have access to this information and the science that's out there. And this particular presentation or a version of it, I think I saw now 2 years ago. Um, and it stuck with me. And it was right when I first started this job. It was probably right around now, a couple years ago. And I saw the presentation and it was so powerful that it stuck with me. And I've talked about it off and on for months. And so I finally, just within the last couple of weeks, was able to connect with Dr. Lombardo and asked him if he would give this presentation to us. And he willingly agreed. So I was very thrilled that he would give it to us, and I think you guys are going to love it. I found this information to be incredibly powerful. I think you will too, especially as it pertains to a lot of the conversations that we're having with our county leaders about how we can better manage pressure within our fishery, specifically around seasonal and full-time guides, and how we can possibly do that from a business tax license perspective. I think perhaps this could be a very visual link for them to understand what we're talking about. But it's so much more than that. And the information is so much more than that. But without further ado, I do want to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Steve Lombardo. When he was doing this research, he was doing his postdoc research for BTT. And Steve, maybe I'll let you give your background um, and your education and where you started and to where you are today, because I think you have a unique path that you've taken. And so, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing now and how you got there?
Sounds good. Thank you, Allison, for the introduction. And I really hope that this talk meets your memory that you had from a couple of years ago. Hopefully, it lives up to it. Originally, I am from Cleveland, Ohio. I have a bachelor's in biology from the University of Akron. Following that, I was a radiological chemist at an environmental lab working on fracking fields and doing sewage waste and all sorts of nasty things. Then I worked for Ohio Department of Natural Resources as a creel clerk. Following that, in 2015, I started my master's at North Carolina State University. From there, I ended up moving to the coast to finish my master's at NC State Centers for Marine Sciences and Technology in Beaufort, or Morehead City, North Carolina. There, I worked on river herring spawning migrations and phenology. Following that, I moved down to Fort Pierce, Florida, Florida Atlantic University Harbor Ranch Oceanographic Institute, to work on a project that was predominantly funded by BTT, working on the bonefish reproduction project. There, we worked on identifying the spawning behaviors and depths that bonefish go to, so doing that acoustic telemetry project in the Bahamas. I also worked on larval dispersal models for bonefish to kind of identify island connectivity in the Bahamas, as well as the efficacy of their marine protected areas and protecting nursery habitats. And then I also worked in Florida trying to find juvenile bonefish habitats in the Keys, which is darn near impossible. I did find one spot. But I also worked through some FWC data to kind of characterize some juvenile bonefish habitats across the different bonefish species that we have in Florida. And so that was kind of some new novel work there. Once I finished my PhD, as Allison said, this is my postdoc project that I did on behalf of BTT. And I'm really excited to share it with you guys. This is only the second time I've been able to present this, as my contract with BTT ended pretty much immediately upon the one time that I was able to give this talk. So from there, I now work at NOAA's National Center for Coastal Ocean Science, or NCOS. I'm located in Silver Spring, Maryland, where I work on informing the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries and doing kind of climate forward assessments for establishing marine protected areas. That work will come to an end in November, and I'm trying to figure out what comes next. But in the meantime, I'm happy to share this research with you guys. So, um, Allison, should I just jump in?
Yeah, Steve, I say go ahead and jump in.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Before I
But
get
before
started, I
you
do
do,
want to.
let me
Oh,
tell everybody, I'm sorry. Before you do, I hid myself and I don't know how to unhide myself.
nope.
Um, I just want to tell everybody that there is a Q&A button down on the bottom screen. If you have questions as Steve is talking, you can put your question in there. And even if you have a question that you want to maybe talk to Steve about or it's more involved, we'll bring you up into the panel after he's done talking. Or you can just type your question in there either way. There's also a chat feature. So if that you're more comfortable putting your question in there, that's fine too. And so we will have a Q&A session at the end of Steve's talk. So, but if you want to go ahead and put your questions in while he's talking, feel free. Sorry, Steve.
Oh yeah, no worries. Thank you, Allison. Also, just since we're on that subject, I'll make sure that my contact information is available for anybody that wants to have private conversations or take some more time. I'll make sure that I'm available for lengthy conversations because there's a lot of information here that we can dive into
Yeah, a whole lot.
through long conversations
Yeah.
afterwards.
Thank you.
So. Okay, so getting in, before I even get started, I want to say thanks to everybody for taking time out of their evening to sit and listen to some science and participate in the conversation that we're going to have afterwards. I'd also like to thank some of the anonymous guides that participated in this work. I don't know exactly who was involved in the interviews that were conducted by Brooke Black, but if you're on this call, I'd like to give kind of an anonymous thank you because none of this would be possible without the guide community and how forthcoming they were in sharing some incredible trade secrets as to where they find all of their tarpon. So I shall jump in. So this project started in 2022 after kind of a decade of rumblings from the guides about a decline in the Lower Keys tarpon fishery. And so this was brought to the attention of Ross and the folks at BTT and amongst the guide community. We can get a visual of this decline using the logbook from Captain Pat Bracher. On the vertical axis there, we can see tarpon catch per unit effort, and on the bottom x-axis, we can see time across there. And as we look there over that 20-year period, a pretty significant decrease in catch per unit effort. So some of the conversations that the guides were having is that they were seeing fewer tarpon. Spots that used to have tarpon no longer did. There was no alternative or apparent alternative habitat use. You guys weren't seeing tarpon in places they didn't necessarily belong. And this issue that was being seen in the lower keys wasn't being seen consistently elsewhere. So in 2023, BTT partnered with the guides to document and describe the changes over time through a series of semi-structured interviews, doing questions and mapping exercises. Also during that time, we partnered with federal and state agencies, universities, NGOs, and private entities to pull together many different data sources to try to identify potential causes of this decline or kind of lines of inquiry that we can further our research. So, getting into the guide interviews, for some of you, if you did participate in these, this map may look familiar too. So, we conducted one-on-one interviews with the fishing guides centered around a gridded map on an iPad. So, this is just a navigational map with a statistical grid overlaid. We then asked them to draw their fishing spots from when they entered the fishery to today. Today, at that time, was 2022. And we wanted them to do that in 5-year bins. And what we had them do with this map was take specific colors representing different size classes. So purple for large, medium for green, small, and yellow. And over time, what we would expect to see is a change in these drawings, whether spots had reduced productivity or different spots increased their productivity or disappeared altogether. And so, with a full time series, what we could do within each of these grids is we can count the number of pixels that are associated with each of those colors. And so that gets you an idea of the size or the catchment of the fishery, which in and of itself is reflective of the tarpon population. So as I said, we also partnered with a bunch of different agencies and groups, pulling in different environmental variables and other potential factors that could be influencing or driving the decline of the tarpon fishery. And these variables fall under 5 different overarching themes. So global processes such as water quality, which includes temperature, turbidity, DO, climate, such as tropical storms, AMO for the uh, different or Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation. Few different things associated with that. Habitat descriptions such as is the area a forereef, a back reef, a flat? What's the bathymetry there? Biological variables such as seagrass cover and prey availability or prey harvest from commercial fisheries and recreational fisheries. Infrastructure such as wastewater locations and their potential spatial and spatial relation impacts, as well as this last set of variables that I refer to as transportation variables, but really are more of a measure of human pressure. And that's vehicle traffic coming into the Keys as well as vessel traffic. So stepping back to the interviews, we had 10 guides participate in the lower keys. We actually had conducted interviews for all sections of the keys, lower, middle, and upper, as well as Florida Bay, Biscayne Bay, and out west up to Chokoloskee. But for this analysis and presentation, we only looked at the lower keys here. But so we had 10 guides participate, and of those 10 guides that fished the lower keys, 4 also fished west of Key West out to the Marquesas. Uh, in total, when we combined everyone's time series, it went back to 1982. So we had 40 years worth of information on how this fishery had changed. So what I'm going to show next is going to be an account of the total area fished throughout time. And so what this is again is counting the pixels associated with those different colors and size classes within each of these grids and just seeing how that changes over time. So over time, we saw a 62% reduction in the amount of area fished for large tarpon. We also saw a 71% decrease in the area fished for medium tarpon and a 57% decrease in the area fished for small tarpon. So pretty significant and substantial declines in the spaces that you can fish for these fish over that 40-year period. So we see here over time a significant decline. Now we have to ask where and when these declines are happening. We have that statistical grid, so we can inspect each of these to see what where in time were those declines happening. There's a lot going on this map, so I'll try to break it down. And so within each of these grids, what we're looking at is this is the raw data here from the guide interviews. And so we're able, this is just one of those grids. And what we can do is we can see that there's a decline going from left to right is time. And then on our y-axis is the amount of area fished by that specific guide within this grid. And we can kind of track that over time, and then doing some statistics, we can identify breakpoints in that to where we're seeing an instance of decline. And so I've done that for all of these different grid cells here. So these grid cells are colored according to the year bin in which a break was identified, whether that break is a decline or an increase. Within each of those grid cells is an upward facing triangle if the area fished increased. You won't see very many of those in this large tarpon map example here. You'll see around coupon bite, there are a couple upward arrows. But for the most part, the rest of them are downward facing triangles. And those downward facing triangles mean that over time, that area fished had decreased. If there's a circle around the triangles, that means that more than 50% of the guides that we interviewed, their data is in agreement. So, taking a look at the lower keys as a whole, we can see a couple clusters here that are important to highlight. And these are areas and time periods that we could have further conversations about. So, looking to the northeast of Big Pine, we see a large deep red cluster. And there, that area saw a decline in the tarpon fishery from 1997 through 2001. And we can move out to the back country and we see this large swath of this deep orange. And that decline happened from 2002 through 2006. Moving on to medium tarpon, there is much more uniformity in the decline here, and it's also much more recent. So in the most recent time period, 2017 through 2021, the bulk of the lower keys saw their decline in the medium tarpon fishery, while west of Key West preceded that from 2007 through 2011 in that orange color. And then moving on to our small tarpon, again, kind of mirrors the or mimics the medium tarpon, as that ontogenetic shift isn't particularly great between those size classes. So again, 2017 through 2021, the bulk of the lower Keys small tarpon fishery saw its decline, and again west of Key West from 2007 to 2011. Just a moment. So now that we've seen that there's been a decline over time, we've seen where and we kind of pinpointed when, we need to try to identify what correlates with these declines, whether we're looking for specific causes or lines of inquiry in which we can do more investigative research to link the decline to these influences. So again, here are five overarching themes, which we put into gradient boosted regression models. If you're into statistics or want to look into it, it's a machine learning algorithm. Ultimately, we put in 108 different variables and derivatives of those variables, and we've create, or well, I guess I did this. I created three different models, one for the large tarpon size class, one for the medium, and one for the small. And so what I'm going to do is go through what the top 10 most influential in predicting the changes in those fisheries, the top 10 variables that were most influential, one by one. So for the large tarpon fishery, the time series of vehicle traffic coming into the Keys was the best predictor of changes to the large tarpon fishery. Now, that being said, I have to stop and take the caveat here that people driving into the Keys themselves do not cause declines in the tarpon fishery. However, you can look at that as more of a symptom of human pressure. So in future runs of this model, I wouldn't necessarily include that variable, but it's there in order for us to have that kind of conversation. And there's a lot of underlying information that we need to further investigate. Other variables that we have that were important are biological ones, such as mullet harvest and seagrass coverage. We also see some of the global processes, such as water quality, water temperature during wet season, salinity and turbidity. And then we also have small vessel traffic was another important predictor of changes to the large tarpon fishery. So I'm gonna pull these variables off of this table here. I'm gonna leave the colors behind and we're gonna move on to the medium tarpon model. So once again, vehicle traffic was the top predictor, followed by tropical events. Again, these are for the ontogenetic shifts in the medium and small tarpon fishery. That's more inland, and tropical events can have a bit more impact on those insular habitats. Water temperature during wet season was an important influencer, as well as, again, we see more of those uh, vessel traffic or vessel density predictors as being important. And then the small tarpon fishery, again, vehicle traffic, followed by tropical events, and more a higher cluster of water quality variables having a significant influence on the health of that fishery, again, being more insular to the lower Keys. So I'm gonna take a step back and highlight some of the patterns that we're seeing across these different model structures and take a little look into those data and how they relate to changes in these fisheries. The first one that we're going to take a look into is human pressure at the vehicle traffic level and what that looks like coming into the Keys here. So this plot is again the change in the area fished for the large tarpon fishery in purple, the medium tarpon fishery in green, and the small in yellow. And then up in the top right corner, we have the monitoring data from the Florida Department of Transportation on incoming traffic into the Keys, so southbound traffic, which they started collecting in 2007. In 2007, there was 11,000 vehicles coming into the Keys daily. Oops, sorry. 11,000 vehicles coming into the Keys daily. Through 2023, that increased to 15,000 vehicles coming into the Keys daily. That's a 36% increase in human pressure. That dip that you see in this black line, I'm sorry if I didn't specify that. I'm directing us towards that black line graph in the top right corner. That dip that you see there is COVID. So there was a momentary respite from people during COVID. But during this time period in which vehicle traffic has been monitored coming into the Keys, we saw a 35% decrease in large tarpon or fishable area for large tarpon, 66% decrease in area fishable for medium tarpon, 38% decrease for small tarpon. So as I said, this is a measure of human pressure, and people coming into the Keys, just driving, don't inherently impact the tarpon fishery. However, those people do have larger footprints than just driving in. Um, so there's some new data in this. So I had worked on this project a couple years ago, or a little bit over a year ago. And one aspect of human pressure that I had always wanted to look into, but I wasn't able to until I made some time yesterday, was the pressure that we put on our wastewater systems. So here I pulled from the Key Largo wastewater treatment plant, from their economic report actually, the processing of wastewater over time. And so we have daily flow being processed on the y-axis, the vertical axis on the left, in millions of gallons per day. And then on the x-axis, we have time. The red horizontal lines are the infrastructure's capacity to process that wastewater. The orange line there is the average daily flow that is being processed, and the blue is the peak daily flow. And so you can see in recent times in 2022, they actually exceeded the amount of wastewater that they could process. So during this time period, again from 2000, or actually if we take the most recent time period with the highest capacity, which is 2015 through 2023, there's been an increase in 47% of the amount of raw sewage that's been processed. So inherently, this is just another measure of human pressure, but ultimately it leads to other things such as nutrient deposition in our coastal waters. So this is a report that I did for the Friends of the Lower Keys, in which we saw nutrient compositions of nitrogen and phosphorus that exceeded EPA regulations, which I'm sure we've all had conversations about the shallow injection wells and their seepage issues and that high degree of noncompliance that we're seeing throughout the Keys. That ultimately leads to things such as pharmaceutical contamination, which BTT did some research into the pharmaceutical contamination in bonefish and their prey and water, which again are other avenues that human pressure can impact the tarpon fishery potentially. And then recently, I had some conversations with friends of the Lower Keys, where they have some great video, or really unfortunate video is what I should say, of the shallow wells around Stock Island seeping and releasing presumably contaminants and manatees feeding from that. So there's a lot of avenues of investigation that we have to work towards on human impacts and sewage and septic waste is one of those avenues. Continuing with the theme of human pressure, and one that may be of interest to most of you is vessel density and the dramatic increase that we've seen in numbers of boats on the water over time. So these data here are from satellite imagery from 2016 through 2022. I took monthly base maps and I digitized or I made digital representations of every vessel during tarpon season that was visible during these or over these monthly base maps, which are kind of amalgamations of daily satellite passes. So you don't get one full image of the lower keys through a satellite pass. It takes multiple, so they can happen on different days and at different times. But when you add all of them together over time, you can get an idea the spatial patterns in which where people go or where their boats are staying, what they're doing. So I digitized small vessels, large vessels, jet skis, sailboats, logged whether they were anchored or motored or sailing, all those different things. And so we have again here our map of the lower keys. We've got our statistical grid over top of it and transparent, and then underneath are these little 1 square kilometer hexagons. And so within there, those are colored to the vessel densities. And so bright pink is extremely, extremely high numbers of vessels, and you'll notice that most of those are around anchorages. But then if you move to the deeper orange color, those are also really high in abnormal numbers of vessels, but you'll see those move out more towards the backcountry or towards the reefs on the Atlantic side, and those are still concerning high levels of vessel activity. And so, what we can do here, and what was suggested by the model, is that vessel traffic is an issue for the large tarpon fishery and many of the other tarpon fisheries. But specifically looking at the tarpon fishery, the large tarpon fishery, we can take a look at what percent of the large tarpon fishery remains and how does that overlap with our high vessel density areas. And so, in doing this, if we look at the deep purple areas that where there's 0 to 22% of our tarpon fishery remaining from its historical peaks, we can see that those areas, as well as the deep orange areas for our high vessel traffic, overlap. And so, we're seeing areas where there's increased vessel traffic equating to a decrease in area fished. And so, oh, actually, I don't know where that went. There's supposed to be something that popped up, but so avenues that we can investigate here. Again, this is fodder for deeper conversations, but avenues that we can take in kind of addressing this vessel traffic issue include improving our aids to navigation to stop shortcutting through channels and running over flats, improved boater safety regulations or training requirements, maybe even specific spatial regulations if there's high conflict areas. And we can kind of workshop through those means that we can pursue to address that. The last set of information and variables that I kind of want to take a look at really quick here is water. So 2 years ago, we had that really bad marine heat wave that ultimately saw water temperatures in Florida Bay reach into the mid 90s. We had severe coral bleaching, and as well, maybe more applicable here, the spinning fish problem ultimately came from it. So water temperature is a severe threat to our fisheries in the Keys. And so looking at dry and wet season temperatures, which again were indicated as important in our models here, we can see on the x-axis our water temperatures, and on the y-axis, the vertical axis there, we can see the amount of tarpon or tarpon habitat that we have available to fish is negatively correlated with pretty steep declines as you increase in seasonal temperatures there. There's not much that we can do in the way of ameliorating the temperatures that we're seeing. So many of the ways that we can address this have to do with handling practices, which the LKGA and BTT have long been advocates for. You know, quick releases, quick fights, and keeping the fish in the water. Other behavioral alternatives could be deciding not to fish specific places based on extreme temperatures. Um, so with that, I'll leave up these slides or these kind of images here for fodder for conversation. And I would be happy to take any questions now and any questions later through email or phone, whether it's a call or a text. I'll make sure that I'm available.
Steve, thank you so much. It was equally as visual as I thought it would be, and as I remembered. Um, Frightening would be a word that comes to mind. But important is another word that comes to mind. I have a lot of questions, and so um, while I don't see that we have any questions in the Q&A or chat yet, but everyone, if you do have questions or if you raise your hand, I will bring you up into the panel and you can ask Steve and we can talk directly. We certainly have a ton of fishing guides on. We have a lot of anglers and just a lot of members of our community on. So I think there's a lot of good conversation that can happen, and we certainly have time to do so. Um, so while everybody's thinking about your questions, I have a few that just kind of stood out to me. And it really, I had a few things that stood out to me, but I want to talk a little bit about the sewage issue and the shallow wells, that wastewater wells that we have. And you and I and Ross and others have had conversation about shallow wells and um, the problem that continues to persist with them. Obviously, folks is bringing to everyone's attention one of those wells that we know is faulty. But I looked back at a map that you had sent me in a previous conversation, and I saw that there's about nine shallow wastewater wells that exist in the still exist in the lower keys, even though we now have the deep injection wells. We have three deep injection wells in the lower keys, two in Key West, and one in Cudjoe. But we still have some of these shallow wells that are existing or persistent. Um, and maybe some of them are non-operational now. But nonetheless, and then seeing those Key Largo wastewater numbers that you put up there, and just seeing that they had a 43% increase in sewage over a period of time. That makes complete sense, just given the amount of how many people were flushing into the Keys during that same period of time. But would it also then, in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, if the wastewater is reporting, if the Key Largo wastewater treatments reporting that percentage of increase on their wastewater, then these shallow wells, wastewater wells that are still in existence, are also seeing increases that are likely causing overflow situations. And I can't help but to think in some of those areas where I saw some of the shallow wastewater wells is where we started to see some, or where I think we've seen some hot spots, if you will, of some of our issues that we've faced as of the last couple of years, like the spinning fish. Um, and so that's concerning to me, and I'm interested in your perspective on that, and um, conversations that we need to have around those. And then that's just the wastewater. There's also stormwater wells that there's like a lot more of those that exist, and there could be a case made that some of those could be equally as bad. And so I'm interested in your opinion on that.
Yeah, there's a lot to dissect and digest when it comes to wastewater or even stormwater runoff, the amount of impervious surfaces throughout the Keys and the way that we're handling those pollutants, and where they're channeled to, and our capacity to actually process them. Yeah, there are those nine shallow water or shallow injection wells that are predominantly privately owned, or small processing facilities. Um, I actually, with our conversation, I started to kind of go back and dig into those, who owns them. What are the numbers looking like for their processed water? Are there any violations? Because FDEP, through their Oracle, I think it's called Oracle, but they have an online database in which they keep kind of scanned documents and records for building permits and status updates and failures and things of that nature. And so um, I don't have an exact poignant perspective on um, what we should do to address them, but I'm trying to wrap my head around that a little bit. I do know you've made mention of the area to the northeast of Big Pine. That area was a hot spot for spinning fish and has long had issues with their injection well there. Lots of failures, either from just near shore water quality monitoring, not meeting EPA standards, or even just inspections on that system. Repeated failures. I've noticed a few of those other shallow injection wells also are repeated failures of functional performance. So I would say that keeping the pressure on addressing those issues is super important, and being together as a community and applying that pressure is super important across all of the different organizations and people that are involved in this process. Um, so I think keeping attention there is a wise pursuit.
Great. We have a couple of questions. One question from Captain C. Friedman is, how do you define the difference between small, medium, and large tarpon for the study?
So that Brooke had taken kind of a kind of sliding approach. She had asked each of the guides to kind of define it, define where they put those breaks in size classes. I would have to go back and reference specifically what she did. Again, my apologies, and that it's been a little bit of time since I looked at those specifics. I do have that written down though in the report. If you go on to BTT's website, I can also just send the report to you, Allison, to share. But if you go on to BTT's website, they have a research tab, and this Tarpon report that is the product of this research is available for everybody to read through. I'm
Uh,
sorry that I didn't have the size class information off the top of my head. I apologize.
that's okay. We can send that out later. And you did answer just now the second question from Captain Chadhoff, which is, did you publish this data and can we reference this study? when we're talking to local governments about curbing development and growth.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's available on BTT's website, and I'm in the process of writing the peer-reviewed manuscript for it. So it's just been a little slow getting through that.
Ross actually sent me the link to it, and so I will put it in
Oh,
the chat.
thank you, Ross.
And that way everybody that's on can find it. But it is definitely on BTT's website. And so it's, yeah, I think it's absolutely something we need to use. And I need to make sure that I can explain it properly. Okay. Another question is it too early to get any data from recent canal restoration projects? Do you have any input on that, Steve, about there have been some canal restoration projects? Do you have any um, information about that?
That's something I would love to be able to incorporate into these models. There's some nuance to the model structures and how they handle space versus time. And so doing the incorporating canal restorations, um, I've never looked at any of the data as it pertains to them. If there's a time series of canal restorations, that may be um, maybe more useful than kind of just this canal was restore, or, kind of just having a list of which ones have been restored. If we can have like a time period and some like water quality metrics that are associated with them, I could definitely incorporate those types of data into these models. I hadn't made any personal contacts with folks that are involved in that type of work. If somebody wants to patch me in to people that have those types of data, this framework can definitely handle it. And that would definitely be something that I would be happy to look into for people.
Great. And just to confirm, Steve, that you do have the same information for the entirety of the keys, not just the lower keys, right?
I have everything except for vessel traffic. That's the only thing. So that's proprietary data from Planet Labs, which they sell satellite imagery. And so it was a rather expensive contract, even as a nonprofit, to work with them. It was $60,000, I think, if I remember correctly, to have access to monthly base maps. And because of the resolution that was required, we needed 3 meter satellite resolution in order um, to best classify these boats. Even small boats, I can still kind of classify them with the small pixels, but you needed 3 meter resolution. And so those data really only went back to 2016, and we were only allowed to have coverage for a certain area. As you scaled up, it got exponentially more expensive. So we just focused our efforts on the lower keys there.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah. So I haven't re-engaged in conversations with those people to see whether they would be willing to. We were actually their first nonprofit client. So um,
Who else would use that data?
so people mostly on the landscape side of things. So they don't do very many over water passes with satellites. But people that are looking for restoration like over time. So actually, coastal Florida would be pretty good. You could use their imagery, their satellite passes at 3 meters to do like to monitor recovery of mangroves post Irma. You could do something like that. Um, and other people are using. They've also got higher resolution data that you can use to track progress for construction projects and infrastructure and other types of things that you'd want to track changes in landscape over time.
Gotcha. Okay. We have a question from Captain Ted Wilson, the Commodore for the Florida Keys Fishing Guides Association, up in the Upper Keys. He said it's his opinion that many of the guides that he speaks with in the Upper Keys that decreased available forage is one of the main contributors to the decrease in the tarpon in our area, along with the lower water quality in Florida Bay, causing the tarpon to avoid us when coming from the West. Your findings don't seem to hold those issues as a big problem. Do you think these problems could differ up in the Upper Keys? If so, it seems that if more wastewater is being shipped north, it would be better. Did he miss something there?
Interesting. Okay. So forage fish. That's a really good thing to bring up. It's a super limited uh, data available to track forage fish. I think I've got so in our large tarpon model, if we look at number two here on this slide, that's the relationship that we get with Gulf harvest of mullet, where there was periods of increased harvest correlated to decreases in our large tarpon fishery. But then if we kind of you can look below there, you'll see a time series there. There's not a whole lot of data available to us. This is commercial harvest. And then the state of Florida put together a striped mullet report, and you can kind of see some instability in the young of the year and post young of the year um, recruits of mullet. So while they say that they're not necessarily overfished, they don't really have a whole lot of data to track these populations, but some instability starts to happen in 2007, where we did start to see kind of the bulk of the decline in the lower Keys tarpon fishery. Um, the data availability is a really big issue, and especially whenever we're talking about forage fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in my time at NCOS over the last year, I might have learned some new tricks that I would take some different approaches. I have some new contacts across the fishery science centers and stuff like that, who I could prod for some potential data that could work. There's some cool things, some cool modeling things that they're doing in the Northeast. Uh, that there might be some ways that we can model where and how many of those fish are being removed, the forage fish, or but if there's no fisheries independent monitoring for those forage fish, which FWC's FIM isn't too heavily active in the Keys, Upper Keys, doing seine surveys and things of that nature. Without those data, it's really hard to pinpoint. But um, what the guides are seeing on the water is informative as well. Whenever we don't have the raw fisheries independent data, just as we were able to work these maps and turn those into data that we can work with. There's probably some local ecological knowledge ways that we can try to produce data that can be leveraged in assessing those forage fisheries. That was only one part of the question. What was the remaining part for wastewater?
The um let's see. I'm trying to get back to it. He said, do you think the problems are different in the upper keys? Like if more wastewater is being shipped north, it would be better. Maybe.
Um, hmm. I'm not sure that I totally understand um,
Let me see.
that part of the
Let me see if I can
question.
find Ted and I'll bring you up, Ted, if you can. Um, and while I'm doing that, I did make a note as well about Ted. I'm bringing you up into the panel. So you're unmuted now. We can see you. Or we can't see you, but we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, Ted.
So the question was, do you think there's differences between
Oh, Ted, we're getting reverb.
you hear me? Hold on. Okay. Um, I was listening to you on both my computer and my phone. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much
Yes, we
better.
can.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Sure.
Yep, we sure can. We got you, Ted.
Okay, I wasn't ready for that. Um, the question was, do you think there's a difference between what's going on in the upper keys with our the quality of water in Florida Bay and what seems to be a lack of forage, not only bait fish, I didn't say this, but crabs as well. It seems like it's higher, a bigger priority up here from just the observations of the guides than your data down there. And I wonder if there could be a difference, and you may not know that. My second question was you'd said that wastewater is increasing, the amount of wastewater that is increasing, leaving the Keys has gone up steadily over the years, and it seems like that would be better to have more sewage going out of the Keys as compared to the days of the cesspools and things like that. And just wondering if I missed something there.
Gotcha. I understand. Thank you, Ted. I think maybe I was just unclear on the wastewater aspect there. So, what I was showing with the Key Largo wastewater treatment plant, that services area from Isla Mirada up to Key West, or up to Key Largo. Excuse me. Sorry. So that Upper Keys area, but there's water treatment plants throughout the Keys. So there's not, I was not trying to show that there was exodus of wastewater from the Keys. There's more volume that has to be processed in the Keys.
And at some point that looked like maybe 2022, there was more than what they could process.
Yeah, let me see if I can come back. I also notice Ross has his hand up, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring him up.
There we go.
I didn't see your hand. Sorry, Ross.
Yeah, so that's that. And then for uh, differences between the lower keys and the upper keys. I haven't had time, unfortunately, to kind of digest or take a deeper look as to what's going on in the upper keys. So my perspectives on the nuances of these data at the moment are really just focused on the lower keys. So um, I wouldn't be able to speak to what's going on in the upper keys too much.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Ross, we're up. You're up, so we can hear you.
You hear me okay?
Sure can.
Fantastic. Steve, that was a wonderful presentation as always. And as somebody who's been working with you for the last couple of years, I feel like we were just scratching the surface with this work. And if you were continued with BTT for a long term, what we could accomplish in terms of solving these problems from a big data perspective. So if y'all fish anybody at BTT, maybe mention how great Steve is, and that it would be the worst thing in the world to have him back on staff for full time. With that said, my question is now, because you look at this from like a data just like straight from the data, like what is our next step? Like if you were driving the truck with infinite amount of money, what would you do next?
I'm okay. I'm not muted. Great. What I've really wanted to do with these data in the lower keys is bring these maps and the underlying data back to the guides, and I want to spot check specific places and see whether accounts that they're bringing to me line up with the data. And then from there, we can go within each of those grids. They're special places. I mean, the lower keys itself is not a monolith. There are different problems in different spaces, and it would be good to walk through those spaces in particular areas of interest that the guides hold, that they want to address certain issues, and we can start forming plans of attack one grid at a time. That's where I would love to take this work next, in addition to doing other species, whether it's bonefish or permit, snook, you name it. We've got willing participants and a data structure and a framework that we can work all our way the whole way through Florida if we really wanted to doing this.
I I'm not a scientist. Um, that's very clear. But as you were talking and Ross, like what you were saying, like I feel like we have to continue this research. This seems like incredibly important to continue it so that we can continue to watch this over time. You have such a great data set here, and there's not been a huge gap yet. So we're still in like a grace period, I think, of being able to like keep a continuous understanding of what's happening. And I think it would be a failure on all of our parts if we didn't find a way to like make this continue to happen, this research.
That
So yeah, I mean, I feel like and listen, I heard what you said. I think it's very expensive. There's a lot that needs to be purchased so that you can get the data to and then there's the manpower and the computer power. There's a lot of parts and pieces here that are very expensive. But I would argue that our fishery is worth it, and this information and knowing this information and being able to validate trends is so important that like yeah, I think we have to find a way to continue it. Um, because and like you said, I think other species too would be great, but I mean just continuing to get like this guide input of fishable areas, looking at pressure. It just all seems to be like the most important thing we could be looking at.
I appreciate that. I really think that it gives us a good roadmap for devising ways that we can advocate for the fishery and for the habitats. It gives us some direction to start rallying around specific things. That was one part of this work that I was really excited as it all started to come together in the 11th hour was that it really does lend itself to identifying avenues that we can pursue to start making things better.
And Ross, when you start to think about like some of the data that you're working on now, as far as, you know, food, a food web, I understand it's for different species, but like you start to overlay all of this information and it starts to tell the larger story of our fishery, the entire story. And I just, oh, it's just like I think it's so important. I don't know how. Um, I don't know how, but I feel like we need to kind of have a meeting of the minds, and figure out how to make it work. And certainly, we have several board members on the call. We have a lot of Florida Keys Fishing Guides Association members on the call, and Ted was on the call. I think we've got to figure out a way to make it happen. Um, and I don't know what that is because we certainly are poor. We're all poor. And there seems to be a lack of grants out there, maybe that are available, but maybe not. Maybe I'm just not looking hard enough. Chad Huff, who's on our board, he just commented that this data is critical to advocating for a fishery. How can LKGA help with continuing this research, either by providing data or monetarily? I think Steve and Ross, I think we need to have like a conversation about it. Like, what is the actual cost? And um, yeah, I mean, the guide power is there. I think the guide power is the easy part in my mind. The money part is the part that we've got to figure out. I don't think that's, I mean, I feel like that's something we can figure out. I feel like we have a ton of anglers that are invested in this fishery. We certainly have fishing guides that are invested in this fishery. We have lots of agencies and partners that are invested in this fishery. So there's got to be a way to figure it out. It's just putting our heads together.
It would be nice to see this framework continue. We've got just as we had been using satellite imagery to track vessel movements or behaviors and things of that nature. Currently, Ross has put together a monitoring program protocol for the Biscayne bonefish PSA. And there are some expensive but alternative means for monitoring vessel traffic. It's an M2 marine radar system that I actually saw at a conference in the Caribbean that Belize is using at Turneffe Atoll to monitor illegal poaching of their reef resources. And I think that there's some conversations going on with other stakeholders, whether it's FWC or some of the parks system, to back systems like that. I think I did a feasibility, just like a coverage and a coverage study, not really a coverage study. I just kind of took the area in which it can cover, and I think you can actually cover all of FKNMS all the way up through Biscayne National Park with I think like five of these things. Ross, definitely please chime in. Just interrupt and speak.
Actually, this is becoming a lot more affordable too. I mean, not to derail this or get into the weeds, but because of increased border patrol and surveillance, the same technology is now being applied on, the second blimp that we see in the lower
Yeah.
keys, also at bonefish towers. So it'd be more or less filling in gaps, and I mean, because it like literally tracks your boat and then takes a photo of you on your boat, and it's very very enforceable and actionable without having an officer. So, but anyways, yeah, I just want to let you guys know. I'll let you know, Steve, I guess, that this technology is being used and already in the keys for different reasons.
Yeah, that's great. If there was a way, I mean, just from my brief time here in the government, I've realized that defense and environmentalism don't necessarily ever get to talk to each other. So I doubt we'll ever get to see those data, but if there was a way to and save some money, that would be great.
I like as I was going to bring up earlier, um, when we were talking about mullet in particular, and we saw mullet so impacted with the spinning fish issue. I just wonder how that is would track on data now, like now, 2 years later, I guess, from spinning fish starting, and we know mullet were heavily impacted. I mean, I think that was the first. Ross, correct me if I'm wrong, but those were the first kind of like signals that we got that something was happening. Now, we know that mullet have spun before, but they were really bad everywhere in the lower keys, in particular when this first started. And it just makes me wonder, like, I wonder what that does to the tarpon fishery. And then when you see like this small tarpon in this study and how impacted they were in the medium size, and then you see and then we know that we're having a mullet issue, and probably that had to have some sort of impact. And just wonder what it would show now. I don't know how you get to that information, but when you started talking about mullet, it just made a light bulb go off in my head. Like, yeah, that had to be majorly effective, and I don't know how we'll know that information.
Yeah, that one's tough. Probably, again, would have UC to see if they would devise some sort of survey for that. But again, then that's just starting a brand new time series. We have all this lost time that we're not able to get those data and start contrasting when things happened.
Right.
Um, so so yeah, getting onto monitoring programs are so key to being able to tease these types of things apart because you have space and you have time in order to figure out how things align. And whenever you don't have one of those components, such as time, then you're reliant solely on space, and hopefully you've got that instead of just like one big large number. So like a lot of like these mullet harvest numbers that I have are for the whole Florida coast on the Gulf side or the Atlantic side. But realistically, it would be much more impactful if we had some measure of those harvests in space and time. So yeah, just advocating for monitoring programs is super important to making projects like this work.
Yeah, I think if I've learned anything in my time here, it's that I think we've neglected I'm not gonna say we. I'm gonna say that I neglected to like really consider how important like having long-term data sets are. And I've seen it now because of the work that you've done, but certainly the work that BTT does and FIU, and seeing how important it is to monitor long term. And it feels it's expensive, and you don't get immediate results, and you're not even getting results really to have like monitoring programs in place. It's just something that needs to happen so that when you're trying to analyze something that happens 10 years from now, we know it was happening now. But that's hard to really like figure out how to raise like fundraise for, have money for now, and plant the seed now and make sure that the seed stays planted now. But that's something that I think is like hitting me over the top of the head of like we need to make sure that we're getting all the data that we can possibly get, and are there holes that we can identify now that might be important later. And it's all relative and predict, we have to predict the future, which is impossible, but um important nonetheless to like continue to do as much monitoring as possible, and that costs money.
Yeah, yeah. And predicting is another aspect. There was no predictive component to this project, but the job that I got brought into the federal government for was to do climate impact predictions. There's a suite of climate products, model systems that NOAA has produced over the last few years through the Inflation Reduction Act, which is no more, the Inflation Reduction Act. All those funds got rescinded, including my salary. But those products, those climate projection products still exist. And those are products that we could incorporate into this type of work here, and we can actually take projections into this, which would be another step forward.
Great. Well, I mean, we've had a few other comments just about how important this work is. I don't think there's any denying it. I think from our end, the next step, I think we probably need to have like a meeting, Ross and Steve, and with our board certainly, but also I think having the Florida Keys Fishing Guides Association board also included to figure out like how collectively we can continue to get this continued, and ongoing, so that we can have like a true understanding of what's happening. Um, Ross, do you have any other ideas of like what we need to do other than have a meeting and just like try to figure out cost and different avenues of funding?
I think that's a great next step, and I'm happy to whatever. Yeah, sounds great, and we can talk more in a meeting later on. But yeah, love it.
Yeah, Steve, I can't thank you enough. I'm gonna see if there's any raised hands, anything in the chat. I think we have one more question from Chad Huff, Captain Chad Huff. With advancements in AI, do you foresee the ability to include a broader set of variables and increased resolution when it comes to correlation?
So this is the models that I used here are machine learning models, which is a subset of AI prior to all of our recent familiarity with it. What I am really interested in is taking kind of a multi-methods approach, so almost a double check on what we're doing here. So it's definitely this generative AI that we're seeing like ChatGPT, Claude, all these other systems really makes handling these data and developing model frameworks much easier, infinitely easier than it was for me 2 years ago. Because I did all of this off the top of my head, following a couple little tutorials from a Medium article from someone that was a data scientist that was actually modeling something to do with economics, and I just translated it from economics into ecology. Um, but now I should be able to power through these things in a much easier way without me having to smash my face against the wall for 2 years, which is great. I'd already developed the framework, but it would be nice to be able to try different modeling methods, seeing how things shake out, getting different insights and such. And that's an approach, again, to harken here where I'm at with NCOS. Normally for a project like this, you'd have a team of 5 people doing this work, as I've now learned in my current position that there are 5 people to do this job that I did pretty much on my own for 2 years. So as far as AI goes, there's definitely going to be a use for it, as far as more quickly developing model structures. Another form would have been image classification, and I tried to do that with the satellite imagery. I tried to make an auto classifier to identify whether it was a sailboat or a small vessel and classify what it was doing. It didn't have too much success with that. Again, that takes a good amount of work, and I kind of figured since it was a one-off thing in this instance that I would just do all the classifying myself rather than building an AI agent to do it. But that might be something that I would revisit if we come back to this, trying to find avenues to use that.
Great.
Great question. Thank you.
Lenny and Ted, you had your hands raised, and I brought you up to the panel, so you can feel free. Lenny, you want to start, or Ted? Either one.
I'll start instead. And just two things. At our last board meeting, which was just last week, it was brought up and agreed upon that the Lower Keys Guides Association and the Upper Keys or Florida Keys Fishing Guides Association should definitely have at least a couple joint meetings a year, possibly one Zoom like this, and then possibly one live. So we've already agreed to something like that, and then folding in Steve and Ross and that aspect of it is definitely something we would be agreeable to.
Great.
And then I had one more question. I had one more question for you, Steve, that kind of going back a little bit, if you don't mind, because you had mentioned that because people are going to ask, people ask, why are there less tarpon? And now my answer sounds like the number one in the lower keys anyways is vehicular traffic. So that's going to raise some questions, but you said vehicular traffic seems to be the biggest factor in less tarpon down there, and you said that they leave there's larger footprints that because of the vehicular traffic and wastewater increase of wastewater being one of them, which we talked about. But are there other factors contributing or coming as a result of the increased vehicular traffic besides increased wastewater that you can tell us about?
So, great question, Ted. And really, again, the model structure lends itself to kind of identifying avenues that we can deeper investigate deeper if there's not an immediate link that we can see from a habitat perspective or from fish reproduction perspective. So, with vehicle traffic, just as you said, that is not our cause of the decline, but it is the human pressure that comes from it. And I've been working through and trying to find different metrics. Again, just looking for different forms of data that we have, whether, again, that's the wastewater. The human pressure thing also manifests itself a bit in this vessel traffic. It's difficult, again, with the way that the satellites pass in order for us to build a time series. But as time goes on, one cool thing with data, if it's patchy, the longer the time series you have, you can bin it. And so, like where we used 5-year bins for the guides here, we can also use 5-year bins for satellite images for vessel traffic. And because there's enough variability captured across multiple years, when you stitch it all together, it kind of smooths out that effect. So we're able to, I could look at, we've got vessel traffic from 2016 through 2021 in one 5-year bin, and then I can do or through 2020, excuse me. That would be a 5-year bin. And then we could do 2021 through 2025 as another 5-year bin. So
I
that
think
would actually give us two
so
time points.
important.
That could give us two time points that we could look at. Where, a couple years ago while I was doing this work, I couldn't necessarily do that. Or, well, I still need to investigate the efficacy of that to see if there's any biases and whether like 5 years is really our nice smoothing point. Maybe it's actually 3 years or 4 years of satellite imagery, and then we can have multiple time periods that we can compare. But it's making sure, like in the satellite imagery, that we don't have biases for satellite passes during like lobster mini season or a weekend or a holiday. Because if you capture Key West during a holiday, that's very different than capturing, or capturing like Marathon on a random Tuesday. So all things aren't created equal with those satellite passes. Um, let's see here. What was I getting at before that? I'm sorry, I might have lost point. I might have lost track of the question, Ted.
Are there other factors besides the wastewater
Oh, right.
contributing to less tarpon because of the human pressure?
Right, yeah. So, a lot of that, I think right now, all I've been able to kind of track down in disturbance metrics would be wastewater volume as a pollutant. We can track over time, again, just as BTT had done, Nick Castillo and Jen Rehage looking at pharmaceutical impacts and concentrations. You could keep monitoring that over time. And then this vessel traffic. Other than those, um, I haven't been able to devise any deeper metrics, specifically how humans are causing point source impacts. But also we can absolutely crowdsource the thought behind that. If anybody has any ideas, avenues that they think that there would be tractable data, I could definitely pursue that. Again, that would be a point source at a local level. There's also, climate variables. I could start pulling in atmospheric information and things like that, CO2 insulation, global warming kind of variables, um, but more specific to people coming into the Keys, I hadn't been able to identify anything else yet.
Can you take
Thank,
that data and can you do it from a seasonal perspective? So for tarpon season, could you see could you see trends during I don't how what's the time period? I mean, can you do it in like a 3 or 4 month period instead of a year, or how is it the time series done?
So it depends. I have different time series for different things that go into this model. So I've got like water quality is split between or yeah, actually you can see it on here between wet and dry. So I had actually kind of bookended the season a little bit early and a little bit late. So I did February through July and then just have that split in half. The first half um, lines up with wet season and then the latter half is dry season.
Okay, great. Lenny, Ted, were you done, or did you have any other questions?
no, that's it.
I just
Thanks.
want you to know and say it verbally. Our board at our last meeting discussed also meeting with your board. So we're all in agreement. We just need to make that happen. And I think we should try to do it after the IGFA tournament. At least get on a Zoom, and I think there are some things that we need to work through initially, and maybe this is one of the topics that we, try to tackle in that first meeting.
Sounds good. We'll come up with an agenda.
Sounds great. Lenny, you are muted, but you are brought in, or you might have typed in your question. I think you did tell me you typed in your question. Oh, he's just curious on your opinion, on your gut feeling about the Gulf oil spill.
Hmm. Um, I or we're referring to the Deepwater Horizon incident
I
in
would assume
particular?
so.
Would
Yes.
assume so. Okay. Yeah, that I would need to do a little bit more work into researching that. I imagine that the impacts and effects on that would were mostly seen or slightly isolated with Texas through Alabama. Um, I'm not well read enough on that to really speak to it. So, um,
Okay,
yeah.
got it. Um, well, I think that is a good wrap up. I think you have properly filled our brains with so many things, and there's a lot more that I think is going to come from this. I can't thank you enough for agreeing to dust off your presentation and being willing to come on at 7 o'clock at night to give it to us. Super appreciative. I'm appreciative for all the people that joined tonight. We had a really big crowd. We did record this because there were a lot of people that couldn't join. So hopefully they'll tune in as well. And then we're going to continue the conversation. I think it's an important one to continue, and we're going to continue it. So, more to come on that, and we'll keep everybody updated on those conversations. But super informative. Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing with us. Thanks for the
You're
time.
welcome. Thank you for inviting me, Allison, and thank you to everyone that took time away from their family and busy schedules to sit in on this. And please share. I guess I can type in the chat my personal information. If anybody has any questions or wants more conversation about this work or just to share their thoughts, I'm definitely happy to sit and just listen to anything that anybody has to say about this work or what they're seeing out there and how our stories align or don't align.
Yeah.
I would love to have those conversations.
Great. I am. If anybody wants or needs Steve's contact information, you can reach out to me at LKGA, Allison at lkga.org, or info at lkga.org. I'll make sure that the information is out there when we send it out, the presentation to everybody. So, in case they want to get a hold of you, Steve. And again, thank you so much for your time. And thanks everybody for joining tonight. And more to come. Great info. Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night, everybody.